Okay. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 4, Verse 15. Aho bhani aho bhama maya vambata papmana purushada ivapadyam bhavo himi sita sutaha. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada, His Divine Grace. Aho, alas, Bhagini, my dear sister. Aho, alas, Bhama, my dear brother-in-law. Maya, by me. Vam, of you. Bata, indeed. Papmana, because of sinful activities. Papa means sin. Interesting. Purusha, Adaha, a Rakshasa, man-eater. Eva, like. Apatyam, child. Bhavaha, many. Himsitaha, have been killed. Sutaha, sons. Translation. Alas, my sister, alas, my brother-in-law, I am indeed so sinful that exactly like a man-eater Rakshasa who eats his own child, I have killed so many sons born of you. Kamsa's words. Purport by Srila Prabhupada, His Divine Grace. Rakshasas are understood to be accustomed to eating their own sons, as snakes and many other animals sometimes do. At the present moment in Kali Yuga, Rakshasa fathers and mothers are killing their own children in the womb. And some are even eating the fetus with great relish. Thus, the so-called civilization is gradually advancing by producing Rakshasas. Okay. Hare Krishna. Good morning, everyone who's been joining. Venetia, Gitanjali. Yes, good morning, Venetia and Gitanjali. Thank you very much, Angelika. Is our presenter here? I don't see him. Okay. So let's do the prayers then. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjala Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yenai Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master is opening my eyes with a torchlight of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him again and again and again. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namini Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharini Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarini Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivas Adigaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, so what's happening with our presenter? Chaitanya Charan. Oh, Krishna. Let me just quickly message him. I apologize for the technical difficulty. Okay. So, the Bhakti Center temple room, is there a devotee who would like to maybe say something in regards to what's being talked about in the verse?
There's a verse in the Bhagavatam. It says, Jivo Jivasya Jivanam. You ever hear that? It says the living entities without legs, like the grass.
He's here.
Oh, go on. Who's that? The living entities without legs, like the grass, they are subsistence for those who have legs, like the cows and the deer and the goats. And then those who have legs, they are the food for those who have hands, like the tiger eats the deer, right? It says the weak are the subsistence for the strong. Oh, there he is. Okay. And everywhere, one living entity is food for another. Okay. Hare Krishna.
Beautiful contribution, Adi Purusha Prabhu. Thank you. Chaitanya Charan Prabhu. Hare
Extremely sorry
Krishna.
for the
Good
delay,
morning.
Prabhu.
No
Extremely
worries. No
sorry for the
worries.
delay.
Thank you very much. So we read the verse, we did the prayers, and the live stream is on. We're all good to go. Hare Krishna. The floor is yours.
चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः. Hare Krishna. So here we see this very dramatic change in the behavior of Kamsa. So he has just been on a killing rampage, killing the first 7 children of Devaki, and just now he tried to kill the 8th also. The 7th had a miscarriage, but then so 6 he actually killed. And now he's about, the 8th has slipped out, and now he's begging forgiveness. He says, I am like a demon. It's interesting. We may think that he is a demon, isn't it? That's how we use the word demon. But he's saying, I'm like a demon. But the point is that demon can be both a species and a mentality. So for example, Ravan was a 10-headed monster. Or for that matter, we have others who had literal physical demoniac features, like say nails, like their teeth coming out of their mouth or horns on their heads. Now, technically, Kamsa did not belong to a demoniac species. He belonged to a human species. He was a relative of Devaki, who was, of course, a god in the human species she had been born. So in that sense, he's saying that I was a human being, I'm a human being, but I have behaved like a demon. And in the future verses, he will say that he will beg forgiveness from them. And he will also try to rationalize what he has done by saying that, oh, don't blame me, it's ultimately destiny. So he has this two-faced Janus-like attitude. One is he's taking blame, but then he's also passing the blame to destiny. Oh, everything that happens is by destiny. So I'll focus here on this theme of, what characterizes a demoniac person. That, as I said, first thing is that not everybody who has demoniac characteristics necessarily has demoniac physique. Their appearance might not be at all demoniac, but their characteristics internally might be terrible, as bad as a demon or worse than a demon's. So if we look in the 16th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, nowhere does Krishna mention anything about the physical form of the people. Because the 16th chapter is called Daiva, Asura, Sampada Vibhaga Yoga, the divine and demoniac natures. So I remember in the early days of my introduction to Krishna consciousness, we used to have skits on how not to share Krishna consciousness with others. So one skit was that, we distribute a Bhagavad Gita to a new person and he say that, read the 16th chapter. In the first 3 verses, you will find me, and in the remaining verses, you will find yourself. And I am of a divine nature and you are of a demoniac nature. It's now that it's so presumptuous, so condescending and outrageous. It's amazing that actually with that kind of, that some of us might have had that kind of mentality if we never verbalize it like that. But the fact is that when Krishna describes the demoniac characteristics, he is describing nothing about their physical form. Broadly, he describes 3 things. First is their worldview. He talks about how for them, any higher purpose to the universe, any higher ordering principle, any higher divinity, that's all unimportant. He says not there or irrelevant. And therefore, pleasure is their driving principle of life. Kamopabhoga parama etavriti nishchita. So I'll talk about demoniac characteristics in 3 terms. First is the purpose of their life. Now, I'm not saying over here by any means that anybody and everybody who rejects God is, or who neglects or rejects God is demoniac. Not necessarily. The Vedic worldview is quite nuanced, and therefore there are 3 modes: goodness, passion, and ignorance. And what it means is that it's not that anybody who just rejects God is immediately a demon. No, it's a rejection of God and adoption of sensual pleasure as life's primary or sole purpose. This dual combination is what Krishna talks about as demoniac. And so what happens is, that's the first thing. And the second is that there are no boundaries. Krishna says, at one level, when Krishna talks about people who are of the demoniac nature, so he says they are constantly scheming for money. They think of newer and newer ways to make money. We may say, okay, hey, that's like most people I know. Even we may be practicing bhakti, but even we may have financial anxieties. And we may be thinking of what is the best way to earn money. We may think of how we can invest, where we can invest money so that maybe in the future we can retire easily or take a less demanding job and seek to serve Krishna more. So, but the thing is, it's not just the constant thinking about the money, but it's the pursuit of money and pleasure without any boundaries. Krishna, from 16:13 to 15, he talks about how they are not only ready to pursue money by any means, they are ready to rob, and they are ready to even murder for gaining money. So that is the absence of boundaries in the pursuit of pleasure. So we can say the rejection of the material and pursuit of the sensual as life's purpose. That's the first characteristic in terms of purpose of life. Second is, if you consider boundaries, in many ways, we all are defined by our boundaries. Okay, am I allowed to share my screen? Okay, good. So, boundaries. So, no boundaries, or we could say neglect normal civilized boundaries in the pursuit of wealth and pleasure. So Krishna primarily talks about wealth over here. But why is he talking about wealth? Because they want wealth for the pursuit of pleasure. So who is a demoniac purpose? So it could say, what are their boundaries? How far is a person ready to go to gain a particular thing? Now, as I said, that we all have certain boundaries. Okay. Most of us, if there is an online, if there's an online website where there's pirated books or software available, we'll download that. But most of us will not go to a shop or a library and just pick up a book from there and steal it and slip away. Somehow digital piracy doesn't seem like robbery, but physical piracy seems too much like a robbery. Physically taking, so we won't do that. So these are boundaries which you all have. So the second thing Krishna talks about is boundaries. So first purpose, he talks about this from 16th chapter onwards. 16th chapter, he talks it from 16:8 to roughly till you can say 11. 11:12 we can talk about it. And then he talks about their boundaries from 16:13 to 15. So in one sense, if you want to take a metaphor of if we consider life to a car driving, then where does one want to drive the car? That's one primary characteristic for determining whether a person is of a divine and demoniac nature. And second is, what are they ready to do while driving the car? Now, we may want to go for an urgent meeting, but suppose, there is a bike which is going very slowly and it is obstructing us and we are beeping, but they're not getting out of the way. Will we just knock the bike off the road and move on? I will knock you out of my way to get to my destination. And now, of course, in a competition, we may say knocked out, but that is within rules. Here, rules are for the pursuit of that is, and rules are, and even you could say flouting of rules is also to different degrees. Different degrees where Krishna talks about even asau maya hatah shatrur hanishe chaparanapi. I have killed this person and I will kill that person now. And not only that, they think of this as a sign of their cleverness, shrewdness. They don't have any sense of remorse. That is what I would like to talk about as the third thing. Third characteristic is so their own attitude toward their actions. So you could put it this way: is that remorselessness, or just because I put it purpose. So is there remorse or not? Attitude towards their own wrong actions. So we all sometimes violate boundaries. The boundaries may be from law, they may be from our culture, they may be from our spiritual path, or they may be from our own morality. We often do, not often, we all sometimes do things that we are not proud of, that we would feel ashamed of, and would be very embarrassed if the world came to know about it. But that very sign that, okay, I feel bad doing that, that itself is an indication that we were not likely to repeat it. But if we could say, is there a remorse for one's wrongdoing? For the demoniac, there is practically no remorse. So Krishna talks about this as, this is clever. Yeah, I did this. And so basically, if we consider here Kamsa, what is happening is, Kamsa, his purpose, what was his purpose? His purpose was to become the most powerful person in the universe so that he could enjoy more and more pleasures. In fact, he had terrorized even the Devatas, and they would live in fear of him. And as far as boundaries are concerned, he has flagrantly violated boundaries. What has he done? He has killed his own family members, not just family members, it is newborn infants he has killed. And it's interesting, at that time, there was no remorse. So now there is remorse. So then the question comes up, is this remorse for real? So broadly, when we talk about can people change? It is in one sense, when we interact with others, it is our eternal hope that people will change for the better. It is our constant, of course, nothing is eternal in the world, but when we are relating with people, our hope is that they will change for the better. And I'm using the word eternal in the sense that with whoever we are interacting on a close basis, we hope that they change for the better, and we fear that they will change for the worse. So if I consider relational emotions, emotions within relationships, the hope is change for the better. And fear is not just no change for the better, but change for the worse. And when we live with these two, it may be we may in a family relationship with someone, we may form a family relationship with someone, we may even want to form a spiritual outreach relationship with someone. But through all of these, this is our hope that yes, that relationship will change us for the better in some ways, and that will change them for the better. Now what happens is that over a period of time, if we see within our Krishna consciousness, when we are practicing spirituality also, one of the things that gives us inspiration and hope is when we see change for people changing for the better. When we see somebody, not just say somebody was wearing a particular dress and they change their dress and they change their appearance, but actually their values change. We see So that, they are committed to Krishna. Even through life's challenges, they stay committed to Krishna. So when you change for the better, it's not just appearances, it's not just appearance, but it's values. When we change that, we get great joy. And if we see, among our biggest challenges for our faith come when we see that people have changed and changed for the worse. Somebody who thought were quite pure hearted, and then we suddenly find that maybe they're manipulative. They gave some advice not because it was good for us, but because it was good for their project, and we were used for the project and just thrown away after that. So one thing is, if somebody falls away by breaking the regulative principles, that's like a gross fall, and that happens. That's one thing. But when we think that somebody is motivated by pure considerations of service, and then suddenly find out their actions were not motivated by service considerations, but by maybe power considerations, and then it can shake our faith. So what happens is, these relational emotions apply for everyone, whether we are in a normal relationship or in a devotional relationship. And then now at one level we can say, to err is human. So we all commit mistakes. So what is that? To err is human. That's a well-known saying. But many of these sayings, they have the normal corollary of the saying is, to forgive is divine. Yeah, that we all commit mistakes. To err is human, to forgive is divine. But sometimes there are more, you could say, humorous or serious variants of this. To err is human, but to persist in error is demoniac. I commit a mistake. Yeah, that's what we all do. But if somebody persists in committing the mistake and doesn't attempt to correct it, but at all they attempt anything, it's only to cover it up, then that can very well be demoniac. That's why I'm not just repeating the mistake, but persisting in the mistake. Sometimes our conditionings take a long time for us to overcome. But if somebody is actively covering it up, denying it, then it can be demoniac. So here, Kamsa is at least exhibiting a remorse, and he's apologizing. So now apology, does apology indicate a change of heart? That is something which we all would like to know when we are dealing with someone who has done something which is wrong, which has hurt us, which has shocked us. So there are broadly three possibilities. One is that it's just for show. It's just for show. So that means there is no actual change of heart, but just for the optics sake, that person is saying like this. And then there is a circumstantial regret. Circumstantial regret means, so it's what happens in this case is, the person is not so much feeling bad about the wrongdoing as they are feeling bad about the consequences of the wrongdoing. So it's not so much that I did something wrong, I got into trouble because of doing something wrong, and that is why I'm apologizing. So quite often this arises because of fear of consequences of actions, or not the actions themselves. You can say fear / regret. You can put it both ways over here. The regret is, it's not, it's more for the consequences. And then we can say there is actually what is intrinsic, that is inner regret, or we can say inner regret is there. So this we see, for example, in Jagai and Madai. Now they didn't just apologize they didn't just seek forgiveness from Mahaprabhu when he was having his Vishnu Chakra about to chop off their heads. They did seek forgiveness from him, but afterwards they went and sought forgiveness even from those people who had no power to harm them. Jagai and Madai, even when their heart changed, still they were powerful, well-built people. And the people whom they had offended, violated, robbed, tormented, They're physically no match to Jagai and Madai. So those people had no power to attack Jagai and Madai or get back at Jagai and Madai. But Jagai and Madai still went and apologized to them. And when some of those people wanted to get back at them by physically hitting them, throwing stones at them, Jagai and Madai didn't get angry and say, how dare you do this? Now we'll show you who we are. They accepted those consequences. So, one test is that of inner regret is that we could say broadly, there are two tests you could say. How long it lasts. Because then the regret is circumstantial. It lasts only in front of, it only lasts in front of the people who can get us into trouble or who have the power to discipline us, punish us. And so how long it lasts and with or to who all it extends. Now, this doesn't mean that we have to go and publicize all the wrongs that we have done to everybody in the world. But at least those people whom we have hurt, we need to apologize to them. So how long do it last, to who all it extends? One of the challenges with respect to, in any spiritual culture, humility is seen as a virtue. But the problem is that for some people, what happens is humility becomes like their password to power. How is that? Because by being humble in front of my superiors, by being very humble in front of my superiors, what happens is that what happens is humility, it's a show before one's superiors to gain a position in a power structure. So if my superiors see, oh, I'm so humble, I'm so submissive, then what happens? Oh, this is a very nice person. They will empower the person. And then that person will not be humble with their juniors or their equals. Rather, once they get power, they will start extracting their pound of flesh from everyone else. So in one sense, humility has to be seen in our dealings with everyone. So similarly, if one's regret and one's apology is only for one's seniors and not for others. Now, of course, the way it is expressed can vary from person to person, but it has to be expressed. It has to be appropriately expressed with everyone. Now, with respect to humility, with respect to juniors could mean just that we give them a patient hearing. We may not always accept their suggestions as instructions, as we might accept our senior suggestions and instructions. But if we just laugh at their suggestions, if we dismiss their suggestions, well, then that's not exactly humility. So let me just complete this point. Then we can have a couple of questions. So here, now let's try to understand Kamsa's regret. Where has it come from? So basically, what happened between that moment when he has already killed 6 children, he's about to kill the 8th child, and what has happened over here? The 7th also, it's a long, complex story. I won't go into that right now. But the point is, what changed over here? This is what Kamsa's regret. What changed was that his vision of Devaki changed. Devaki, he felt that the goddess whom he worshipped had appeared through Devaki. So he felt that somehow what happens is that people often even separate the heavens according to their conceptions. That means, if our vision of God is someone who hates the people whom we hate, then that is not really God. That is just our projection onto heavens. Now, if I think anybody who offends me is going to be punished by God, then what has happened is, it is my ego projected onto the divine. So for him, even the heavens were separated. He said, oh, the goddess is on my side. Vishnu is my enemy. And if Vishnu is going to appear through the womb, then I have to kill. But if the goddess whom I worship is going to appear from Devaki's womb, oh, Devaki must be somebody special. So what had happened was that he had projected earthly wars onto the celestial domains. So he thought that actually, if the goddess Durga whom I worship, in Mathura there are places where Durga is worshipped, and even now in Mathura there is a place where Kamsa says to have worshipped Durga. So what happens is she starts thinking that she must be a very special person, and if the goddess whom I worship has appeared from Devaki, Devaki is special, and therefore if I have killed her sons, that's terrible. So it's not that he has given up his demoniac mentality suddenly. He thought that I had done something wrong. In fact, if you'll see his full reasoning and then look at Acharya's commentaries, he doesn't regret killing the children so much as he thinks that he has been misinformed and misled by that celestial voice which said Vishnu will appear as the eighth child. So he thinks that, oh, all these gods, they are my enemies and they misled me. And because of them misleading me, I ended up killing my own nephews. So his regret is not for the killing per se. His regret is that, oh, I was misinformed, I was manipulated. And therefore, it's largely arising from the circumstances. See, generally speaking, whenever we hear something, it is, say, for example, if speaker gives a class, generally the audience, if they're reasonably attentive, they will get 20% of the content fairly well. But only God knows which 20% it will be. Sometimes it might just be some jokes which were told. So at this point, what happens is, so Kamsa is exhibiting selective hearing, or at least we can say selective comprehension. It's selective hearing comprehension. So right now, all that he hears is, he says that it's more of, let's put it, comprehension over here. It's because he hears everything, but he doesn't actually doesn't get everything. So all that he thinks is, as I said, I was misled in killing my nephews. And he's basically, the sight of the goddess appearing for him is very impressive. And that's why he regrets. And he is apologizing. But after the events go on for some time, then what happens is, he starts thinking more, what did the goddess say? The goddess said that the one who is going to kill you has already appeared somewhere. And that's why immediately his tack changes. He says, okay, where has the child appeared? I'm going to go and kill him. And then he sends Devaki on, he sends, not Devaki, Putana on a infant killing rampage, infant killing mission. So now that is all his focus is. But next morning, practically speaking, his focus will be, my nemesis has already appeared somewhere. Nemesis, the person who's going to kill me, has already been born somewhere. So at this stage, he doesn't suspect a whole conspiracy by which, is it that the child appeared as Devaki and Vasudeva and they took him somewhere else? They think that, okay, I don't know what happened, but I was tricked by the Devatas. So initially he thinks that the Devatas were all false and there was nobody who was going to come to kill me. But then he remembers the goddess words and say, oh, maybe what the Devatas fooled me about was that the child will appear through Devaki. Maybe my nemesis is going to appear through someone else, somewhere else. And therefore, let's not take any chances. Let's kill everyone. And as he goes out he sends various demons on their killing rampage. And slowly his suspicion zeroes down on Krishna. And he starts sending more and more demons to kill Krishna. Till finally, he invites Krishna to his own territory to slaughter him over there. So the point over here is that his remorse is entirely circumstantial. It is not that he ever considered his intentions to be wrong. It is not even that he considered his actions to be wrong. He considered more the specific direction of his actions to be wrong. For him, the killing the children was not the problem. Oh, I killed the wrong children. That was the problem. So that's how we can understand that even if somebody apologizes, somebody expresses some remorse, if it doesn't last, if their actions don't actually change, then sometimes it is said for some people, they apologize so casually that their apology is not worth the paper on which it is written, or their apology is not worth the time they spend in making that apology, because they're just not serious about it. So here the demoniac characteristics are seen in Kamsa, although at this point he's not appearing to be demoniac, but still in long term, and not such a long term also, soon, within a few days, his real nature will surface. Now, does that mean that people never change? Well, certainly people can change, and that's the purpose of our sharing Krishna Bhakti. But we can't get carried away by just words alone, or just temporary short-lived actions alone. I have to wait to see if the change persists over the long run. If it does, then it's wonderful. If it doesn't, then quite often the apology might just be a strategy for a person to continue their nefarious activities. And that is what Kamsa eventually ends up doing. Now, was his apology here just a show? Well, it might have been earnest, but even when he's earnestly apologizing, he's also saying, oh, actually it was all destiny. So he's not really taking responsibility. Yeah, I'm a bad person, but I'm not really a bad person because they made me do like this. So as long as one doesn't take responsibility for one's actions, then wants to push on the responsibility, whether it is to the devatas or to destiny or to anyone else, then it's quite likely that the person will not be able to change themselves. So I'll conclude with one last point, and then we can have a discussion or questions. That, see, this is a question that the extent of responsibility. If we consider that if somebody does something wrong, how much should they be held responsible, and how much should be their circumstances, their situations, those be held responsible? So that means, should we let the person off the hook? Oh, because you are caught in a bad situation. Sometimes somebody pushes us to do something and we just yell at that person. And then that might be completely out of characteristic for us. We don't speak like that with others. But at that time we were caught in a bad moment. So there is somebody did a terrible thing. So we could put it, somebody did a terrible thing, and then somebody is a terrible being. They're two very different things. So when can we say that somebody who has done terrible things is a terrible person? So when do we extend the responsibility from the particular action to the person itself? So in general, the attitude should be, the person apologizing takes responsibility. We could say it takes almost full responsibility. It was I who did like this. And person forgiving, what they do is they consider circumstances. What that means is that if we consider the example of Kaikai and Ram. So when Kaikai goes to hatches the whole conspiracy under the influence of Manthara in the Ramayana to have Ram exiled to the forest. Later on, Kaikai goes to the forest with Bharat and she begs Ram to come back, and she apologizes fervently. So she says that I did a terrible thing and it has caused, please, I don't want you to stay in the forest. Please come back. But then at that time, Ram tells Bharat, and Ram tells Bharat, don't be hard on Kaikai. It was the will of destiny that I leave the kingdom and I go to the forest. And it doesn't go to full extent to say that this is all a part of my plan, everything, but it's the will of the destiny. So don't be too hard on her. So the point is that if a person who is forgiving, they start pinning the whole blame on you. You are a terrible person. You are a terrible person. Then what will happen is that will really sour the relationship. On the other hand, the person who is apologizing says, actually, I didn't do it. This happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. Then the other person will start thinking, yeah, are you really apologizing? Are you apologizing, or are you simply excusing yourself by pointing to all the circumstances? So this is the best. Amanina manadena. That person who is apologizing just accepts full responsibility. It is I who did it. And the person who is accepting the apology, manadena. Yeah, actually, the kind of circumstances you're in, probably I might have done the same thing. I might have done the worst thing also. We don't have to necessarily say that, but that mood can be there. And in that way, we can put that particular incident behind us and move forward. So that is the way. Even if somebody has done something terrible, even something which might somebody consider demoniac, gradually it can be that can be put in the past, and that individual can move forward, and those who are in the relationship with that individual can also move forward. So I'll summarize. I spoke 3 main points today. First was about the whole theme was that now what makes a person demoniac, and especially with respect to their wrongdoings and their apologies. So first I talked about Krishna talks about demoniac not in physical characteristic terms, but in terms of the purpose of their life, in terms of their boundaries, and in terms of their attitude toward the violation of the boundaries, whatever they might be. And then we talked about when somebody apologizes, it may be just for show, it may be because the consequences of their actions are hurting them, or it may they actually have realized that their actions were terrible. And the first is the most superficial, and the last is the best. And we look at Kamsa's apology. He has apologized, but it's not so much for his actions, but for the feeling that I was misled. And I was misled, and that's why I did something terrible. That's why he tries to bring in justification of destiny also over there. And lastly, so we talked about how much should be a person be held responsible. The person apologizing takes full responsibility. Amanina, I did a terrible thing. But the person forgiving or considering, they say, oh, you were in a terrible place at that time. They look at the circumstances. That way, the interaction can be smooth, and that particular incident can be put in the past, and both can move forward to a healthier situation. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Beautiful class, Charan Prabhu. Thank you very much for moving us into a beautiful situation of Krishna consciousness by your presentation. Thank you very much. So let's get some questions. I see something in the chat. Chaitanya Charan Prabhu, would you like
Yes, I'm also seeing it.
You see it? Okay.
Yeah, I can see. So thank you, Andrea, about Kamsa's comment about Kamsa's mentality. Yeah. Now, Krishnadaya Prabhu is asking, our hope increases when a person advances. Well, it is both our hope in the person as well as in the process. Because what happens is, with respect to Krishna consciousness, there is, you could say, a clinical aspect and an individual aspect. So clinical means when a person is doing something wrong, we could approach it from a clinical or medical perspective. This person is sick, and this is the medicine, and this medicine, if they take it, they'll get healthy. That is the clinical medicinal aspect to it. But then when people are doing something wrong, there is the moral aspect to it also. So that, is this person strong enough to do the right thing? Is this person strong enough to take the medicine? So we could say that if at all we want to consider like a medical metaphor to apply for Krishna consciousness, it's not something like a malaria or a flu. It's more like something like alcoholism or some other addictive disease, where it's not just a simple medicine that has to be popped up. Taking the medicine and committing the medicine requires willpower, requires firmness. So the point I'm making is that if it's simply if we approach Krishna consciousness only as a medical or from a medical or clinical perspective, then we could say that, yeah, I have seen many people change. Like a doctor may say, I have seen many people being cured by this. So I have faith in the process. So if we have been around in Krishna consciousness for some time and shared with others, and we have seen people change, we may have faith in the process. But at the same time, whether a particular person changes or not, that will say, oh, you are really serious about the process. You are committed to this process. So then that is faith in the person also. So it depends. It can be both. Both are involved, faith in the process and faith in the person. But I would say with respect to specific people, if that person is, whether that person is committed or not, that reflects the faith in the process. Sorry, faith in the person. And if that person is we could say way morally disintegrated, far more morally disintegrated than the kind of normal people we interact with, even in our Krishna conscious outreach, then if that person changes, that may also increase our faith in the process. So it depends. It's a combination of both.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu. Yes, Arjun Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, wonderful class.
Thank you, Prabhu.
We have to go. No time. Hare Krishna.
Okay, maybe we can take one more from the virtual audience. Does Bhakti transmit virtually, Chaitanya Prabhu? Or
Yes,
in person?
please. Yeah, please, you can. You would like to ask? I'm not able to see.
I asked if Bhakti can be transmitted virtually or just in person or both.
Or Bhakti can be translated?
Transmitted.
Okay, Prabhupada translated Bhakti as devotional service. So my understanding is that there was both the internal and external dimension to it, that the heart is having attraction toward Krishna, and the service dimension is the external, it is expressed through actions. So was that the question, or did I misunderstand the question?
The question was, transmitted. Yeah.
Transmitted through what?
Can Bhakti be transmitted virtually or personally only, or both?
Oh, okay.
I'm concerned about Krishna Daya Das. He's here virtually, and I'm wondering if Bhakti is being transmitted.
Okay, can Bhakti be transmitted virtually? Well, first thing is that, okay, I have elaborate 10-minute answer on my website on this, but I'll make it 3 points very quickly. First is, Bhakti is independent, apratihata. It is not interrupted by anything material. So if it is not interrupted by anything material, that means it cannot be affected by factors like physical presence or virtual presence. So in that sense, if somebody says Bhakti cannot be transmitted virtually, I would like to see a reference specifically for that, and a reference strong enough to counter the point that Bhakti is not dependent on any material factors. So that Bhakti doesn't depend on anything material. So that's one point. So I don't see in principle any limitation on Bhakti Devi being transmitted virtually. Having said that, we have to also understand what Bhakti means, or what Bhakti transmission means. See, quite often different people, if we consider the transmission of Bhakti, it's like less like consumption and more like osmosis. Consumption is something like I consciously take it in my mouth, and osmosis is something like it's just permeates into us. Osmosis, like the transmission or transfer of substance, which we don't even notice it just happening. So sometimes it says Krishna consciousness is more caught than it is taught. That means when we see others behaving in a devotional way, that's what inspires us. So Bhakti has multiple dimensions to it. There's the intellectual dimension to it. There's the social dimension to it. There's the cultural dimension to it. So by social dimension means we interact with different devotees when we meet them. You could say cultural dimension means that we bow down before the deities, we worship them, we take the Charanamrit. There are various cultural aspects to Bhakti also. So in general, depending on which aspect of Bhakti inspires a particular person the most. So for example, the intellectual aspect is probably the easiest to transmit. So different people gain strength in their Bhakti from different dimensions. So for somebody, if the primary strength of Bhakti comes from the intellectual side, they hear classes, they become convinced, they're absorbed. Their remembrance of Krishna is also more in terms of verses and prayers based on verses and philosophical points. That's what absorbs them. Then I would say for them, bhakti transmission through virtually will work out almost as well as other times, or maybe even better, because for them the social aspect might just be too much of a distraction, too much of a stress. And for others, if say the cultural aspect is the most important, you actually go in front of the deities and offer obeisances. Then okay, you can see the darshan on the phone or laptop. But do I bow down in front of the phone and offer obeisances in front of the phone? Well, most people won't do that. So they may feel that, okay, if the cultural is what is giving us nourishment, and actually hearing the arti bell, actually hearing the conch when we are in the temple, for those people, the bhakti transmission may happen much more when they go to the temples or they go physically. So now for the social aspect, it depends. Sometimes there are classes where there's no, for many devotees, when they go to a program, it's not just to hear the class. It's after the class, they interact with other devotees. And that's what gives them a sense of belonging and community. So is that happening virtually? That may not happen in the class, but there might be counselor meetings or there might be other forums where it happens. So ultimately, bhakti is, we can say, the desire to serve Krishna, the attraction toward Krishna. It is. So is that desire to serve Krishna, is that attraction toward Krishna being infused? So I would say, depending on which dimension of bhakti a person gets strength from, that will determine whether the digital transmission of bhakti will work as effectively or not for particular people. And the last point I'd make is that in general, if you look at our tradition, there is the concept of Manas Puja. Manas Puja is that that the Lord can be worshipped in the mind also. That we can pray to the Lord in the mind. And there are incidents, celebrated incidents in the Bhakti Samad Sindhu about that. So we could say digital worship or digital practice of bhakti is something similar to the mental practice of bhakti. Although in the mental practice of bhakti, we depend primarily on our imagination alone, whereas in the digital practice, we have stimuli created with the help of technology for us. But still, the difference in my understanding would be that if you look at what the Bhakti Samad Sindhu says is that generally a person should do the mental worship, Manas Puja, when they are not able to do the physical puja. The Manas Puja should not become an excuse for not doing the physical puja. That mental worship should not just, mental worship is the same as physical, so why do the physical? That's not the mood. So similarly, whenever possible, a devotees should prefer actual physical association. But when it is not possible, then certainly Krishna is bhavagrahi, and Krishna can accept the emotion even through virtual means. But Krishna, as I say, Krishna is bhavagrahi. Krishna sees the emotion is not so much the because of certain circumstances I can't go. I just don't want to take the trouble to go there. And then in that case, the potency would be much lesser. So that's my broad understanding of how. In principle, yes. In practice, it depends on the source of inspiration for a person within bhakti and the source and the motivation why a person is choosing digital practice of bhakti over the literal physical practice of bhakti. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Chaitanya Charan Prabhu. Okay, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Shiva Prabhupada ki jai, Chaitanya Charan Prabhu ki jai. Everybody on this call and on YouTube and elsewhere, ki jai. Hare Krishna. We love you all. Have a wonderful day. Have a beautiful weekend. Remember Krishna, Hare Krishna. One more question in chat. Hold it. One more question in chat. Angelica says, I actually heard, does bhakti transcend virtue? I think this is a proper question to ask. All right.
Okay. Does bhakti transcend virtue?
Angelica, what are you up to? What are you trying to justify?
Okay. Well, again, this I would say depends on context. That bhakti is in one sense the highest virtue. And there are cases when for the sake of bhakti, a devotee may do something which is not considered virtuous. Say, for example, the gopis leave their family and leave their homes to go to Krishna. And that is we could say, if it's immoral, moral, and transmoral. So yes, in principle, if somebody is purely motivated by the desire to serve Krishna, then that desire can supersede normal considerations of virtue and ethics. That's the principle. At the same time, such situations are exceptional. The exceptional is not meant to be made normal in the name of being transcendental. That bhakti is transcendental. So it's not that we can routinely lie or cheat or whatever because we are doing it for Krishna. Normally, if we see in the 12th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna talks about what endears him to a devotee, or what endears a devotee to him, rather. Sorry. So, and he says that he talks about qualities. Adveshta sarvabhutana maitra karuna evacha. From 12:13 to 12:19, he is talking about various qualities. And it's significant, not one of these qualities is directly devotional. Krishna is not saying if you chant attentively, my name's, you will be very dear to me. If you regularly read Prabhupada's books or Shastra for 1 hour, you will be dear to me. You will be dear to me. You every day do deity worship, will be dear to me. There's absolutely no reference to a single devotional activity over there. It's all reference to virtuous activities. It's all reference to, okay, stay equipoised, be forgiving, and be compassionate, and don't get carried away by life's dualities. So it's more of virtues that characterize the mode of goodness. And Krishna says, these will endear a devotee to me. So clearly for Krishna, virtues are important. And so in one sense, if a devotee has no virtues and still has devotion, Krishna is pleased with that because they have devotion at least. But if you want to consider in terms of a spectrum, just having devotion is pleasing to Krishna. Having devotion coupled with virtue is even more pleasing to Krishna. And in the rare situations when a devotee has to choose between devotion and virtue, and at that time, if a devotee chooses devotion over virtue, then that is extremely pleasing to Krishna. But that is an exceptional situation. The normal situation, that devotee is responsible, the devotee is virtuous, and that kind of conduct is what pleases Krishna. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Charan Prabhu. Excellent answer. Wonderful. Very satisfying. I hope Angelika is satisfied by your answer. Okay. Hare Krishna, everybody. Love you all. Hare